Good morning. This morning, I'm talking about a bit of an abstract subject, but for esoteric students, spiritual students, is very important. So I suggest that you take notes or you listen to the recording on our YouTube account later on this afternoon or sometime during the week, because it does take thinking. And because of the deep levels of this whole theme and what a veil is and what a web is and how these veils and webs affect our consciousness, for me anyway, it's very exciting. It's very spiritually scientific, and it serves as a standard of measure as to where our consciousness is on the path of transformation. So I hope you enjoy the talk this morning. Since this is the month of highly charged spiritual energy, including the energies of the new group of world servers, this is a whole week from December 21st to December 28th, the new group of world servers week. Then we have winter solstice, we have Christmas, we have that moment of the global moment of silence, which is going to take place on the 21st of this month, December. So there's a lot of activity going on, and this activity is promoted initially subjectively from hierarchy to the ashram to the members of the ashram, and finally to humanity. So it seemed appropriate, for me anyway, it seemed appropriate to talk about the veils of consciousness and how to prepare ourselves to eliminate the obstacles that prevent us from penetrating these veils. Now, I'll give you a clue. The veil is like an accumulation of obstacles. So in this veil permeates certain obstacles that are designed to challenge us to move forward on the path of consciousness, on the path of evolution. So that's just a little clue about what a veil is. According to the Ageless Wisdom tradition, there are veils that separate each plane of consciousness. So a question you can ask yourself, why is a veil there? Why is it necessary to separate each plane of consciousness? What is a plane of consciousness? Do you see how you can take these ideas and formulate questions? We would call these questions seed thought. A seed thought is a thought we take into meditation, and if we can align ourselves to the energy of that seed thought, we will align ourselves in such a way that answers will come, and we'll begin to understand these obstacles that are preventing us from penetrating the veil. So again, there are veils that separate each plane of consciousness. Between each plane, there is a veil. This veil prevents us from entering a particular hall of consciousness. It prevents us from entering a particular hall of consciousness. This tells us there's more than one hall. It prevents us from entering a particular hall of consciousness. We are told that there are 7 halls. In total, there are 7 halls mentioned in the teaching, the advanced teaching of the Ageless Wisdom. This is not a teaching that's easily found, but when you're ready, you will find it. So we're assuming that we are ready since we're listening to it this morning. There are 3 halls that are concerned with the personality. I'm not going to be talking about these halls this morning. I'll give their names, but I'm going to be concentrating on the 4th through the 7th hall. But just know that the first 3 halls are related to the personality. Then there is a hall which is concerned with the higher self. And there are then 3 higher halls which are related to the 3 higher planes of consciousness. And these 3 higher planes of consciousness are known as the Buddhic hall, or the Buddhic plane, the Atmic hall or plane, and the monadic plane. And like I said, there is a veil that separates each hall of consciousness. There is a veil that separates each hall of consciousness. So let me give you the names of these 7 halls. The first hall, I kind of like, actually, even though it's a bit negative to our ego. It's called the Hall of Ignorance. That's why I say it's kind of negative to our ego, because who likes to think that we're trying to enter the Hall of Ignorance, right? Anyway, that's the first hall, and the first hall of ignorance is related to the physical plane. The second hall is called the Hall of Learning. Now that's appealing, isn't it? But apparently there's a veil between the Hall of Ignorance and the Hall of Learning, which we have to find a way to penetrate, or to rend, as the word is. And the Hall of Learning corresponds to the astral plane and the lower mental plane. Now the third hall is called the higher, or the Hall of Wisdom, the higher mental plane. So all 3 of these halls relate in some way to the physical, emotional, and mental bodies. And I will not be talking about these 3 halls this morning. I want to go into the more advanced halls. Now the 4th hall is called the Hall of Concentration. And this hall is a sphere of the soul. The Hall of Concentration, that's the 4th hall. The 5th hall is called the Hall of Choice. Isn't that, I love that. I love that hall of choice. We all love choices. Anyway, that's the 5th hall, the Hall of Choice, and it corresponds to the Buddhic plane of consciousness. Then the 6th hall is called the Hall of Direction. The Hall of Direction, and it corresponds with the Atmic plane. And then the last hall, the 7th hall, is, this is just so beautiful. I mean, it just opens up a whole world of imagination and creative thinking. And this is called the Hall of Monadic Light. Isn't that beautiful? The Hall of Monadic Light. And of course, it corresponds with the monadic plane and beyond. So those are the 7 halls, and I'm going to repeat them again because I know most of you are taking notes. The Hall of Ignorance is the 1st hall. The Hall of Learning is the 2nd hall. The Hall of Wisdom is the 3rd hall. The Hall of Concentration is the 4th hall. The Hall of Choice is number 5. The Hall of Direction is number 6. And the Hall of Monadic Light is number 7. Now, the veils. The veils act as an inhibitory factor. The veils act as an inhibitory factor to us as we, the student, seek to make progress. They inhibit our progress. Isn't that interesting, these veils? So as we move onward upon the path of evolution, these veils then become obstacles or obstructions. Now, that causes me to think about Agni Yoga teaching. It says, bless the obstacles, for through them we grow. See? So this talk is just, it was so much fun to put it together and to create it. And then because of all the thinking that it evokes, okay, these veils are obstacles. Where have I heard that word obstacle before? Agni Yoga, right? Blessed are the obstacles. Now we recognize that these obstacles are progressive, they're positive. We want these obstacles in the form of a veil to help us to progress. And this is why in the teachings in Agni Yoga say that this is such a difficult path, because we're trying to magnetically draw these obstacles to us so that we can render the veil, which is preventing us from getting into the next hall, or in this case, the hall of concentration, which is the fourth hall. And just to give you a little idea, this fourth hall is the hall that most of us on the path today are trying to penetrate, because this is the hall where you're going to find the energy of the third initiate, the consciousness of the third initiate. Okay. So, these veils, sometimes called forces, are largely unseen obstacles to our spiritual progress. Well, I don't like the word unseen. Why is that? That means we're blind to the obstacles. An obstacle occurs and we think, God, why me? I'm serving you. I'm doing the best I can. Why are you putting obstacles on my course? And these are obstacles I don't even see. Well, I'm trying to make a little joke of it, but in reality, there is a discipline in the teaching that challenges us to the science of observation, right? Why are we being challenged? Why are we being taught to practice the science of observation? So we don't trip over these unseen obstacles. That's one of the reasons. See how this is all coming together? These challenges and these tests and these disciplines, and why we are supposed to bless these obstacles. Blessed are the obstacles, for through them we will grow. So we can penetrate into these higher halls of experience. Now, these veils lie between the subtle, our subtle inner being, the mental and astral bodies, and also our physical brain. These veils are what prevent or prevents any brain registration about the causes and the meanings of the events in our life. Isn't that interesting? This is why we come back from one incarnation into another as stupid as we were in the previous incarnation, because of these largely unseen obstacles, until we practice the science of observation, until we increase our sensitivity, until we have a sense of purpose. Then little by little by little we find ways to rend these veils. But meanwhile, these veils prevent any brain registration about what's going on, the causes. that are going on in our life. These events can be related to the activities of our personality life, the physical body, emotional body, mental body, or planes of consciousness. And interestingly enough, it can also be the result of personality integration. See, we could have a whole seminar on this. Why? Why would we can ask ourselves, would these veils not be recognized or understood or prevent us from progressing because we just integrated the personality? It's a challenge. So, and our teacher has told us time and time again, integration is not a great accomplishment, right? It's the alignment to the higher energy that creates the accomplishment. Also, what's interesting, these forces, veils are also called forces, and I like that term. It's more explanatory, perhaps, by definition, that these forces can be dominated by the effects of the energy of our solar angel. Now, what does this mean? It means that our solar angel is activating the obstacles in the veil. And then what are we going to do with these energies? This is why I said at the beginning of the talk this morning, this is the month of highly charged spiritual energy. Now we can take the energy of this month, the energy of the New Group of World Servers Week, the energy of the winter solstice, the energy of Christmas, the energy of that silent minute that's going to be experienced all over the world, and the energy of the solar angel to penetrate or to rend one of these veils. So the solar angel, when we were told the solar angel dominates the effects of these energies, if we align ourselves to the beauty, the light, the love, the power of the solar angel, we will rend the veil, a veil. With spiritual discipline and training, as a conscious human being, as a conscious disciple, we can evoke these forces and break down the veils that eventually produce a coordination between our higher self and the brain. There's a veil that's going to be rendered, so now there is no obstruction between the higher self and the brain. So the causes of the obstacles will no longer be unseen, but understood. The teaching explains these veils are as curtains over the windows of vision. They prevent the realization of that which lies beyond the room or beyond the area of the average or the mediocre experience. And they prevent the light from penetrating. This is a quote from the Tibetan found in the book Rays and Initiations, page 195. So I'm going to repeat this. These veils are as curtains over the windows of vision. They prevent the realization of that which lies beyond the room or area of an average or mediocre experience, and they prevent the light from penetrating. It prevents us from understanding the cause behind the events that are taking place in our life. In other words, the veils prevent us from understanding the causes. The veil which obscures the door leading to the hall of concentration, the fourth hall, right? The fourth hall is called the veil of impulsion. The veil of impulsion. This is the veil that the advancing person is going to meet. So this is making the assumption that we have rendered the veils between the first and the second and the third halls. Now we're being challenged to render the veil of the fourth hall, the hall of concentration. This is the hall that, as I said, an advancing consciousness meets. Once the door to the hall of concentration is entered, then we gain entrance into the consciousness of a third degree initiate, which ultimately ends in the experience of transfiguration. Now, we can only imagine what the experience of transfiguration is, but we can understand it better by the stories and the events and the myths and the legends of the great ones that have gone before us. And they've tried to explain what transfiguration is through their own experience, but in a way that it won't scare the bejeebers out of us, right? And again, this is why we need those veils from between this hall and that hall and this hall and that hall to prepare us to enter into this hall of concentration, the fourth hall. This veil is the accumulation of Maya, glamour, and illusion. And it is called what? I know you know that. The dweller on the threshold. To get into that fourth hall, the hall of concentration, means to confront the dweller on the threshold. In order then to penetrate this veil of impulsion, we must meet and defeat the dweller of the threshold. And normally this takes several lifetimes, several incarnations. At the first two initiations, we struggle with this obstacle. Eventually, we are going to sense the inner guide. What's interesting, though, we're told, the teaching tells us that soul infusion, also called in some schools the mystical marriage, cannot take place until we penetrate or rend this veil and pass through it. So all of that is wrapped up in how we can enter into the hall of concentration and rend that veil. Now, the next hall is the fifth hall. The fifth hall corresponds to the Buddhic plane of consciousness, and it is called the veil of distortion. The veil of distortion. Now, the veil of distortion is related to glamours, as its correspondence is a subtle sphere. So now we're not talking about personal glamour. We're talking about world glamour. Okay? Now, the sad thing about, pardon me, I have a constant dripping nose. The sad thing is that even though we confronted the dweller on the threshold and we conquered the dweller and we put it aside and we have now taken the initiation of transfiguration, or that third initiation, that there's still glamours out there in the world today. And because we are all one, we're still affected, but now we're more in control. I would like to think, anyway. So after the glamours are entirely lifted up and cleaned, that's when we as an initiate, notice the difference between a disciple and initiate. This is where the Tibetan says, I am a disciple of a certain degree. Well, we're talking about an initiate at this point. When, after the glamours are entirely lifted up and cleaned, the initiate enters into this fifth hall, the hall of choice, which leads us up to the fourth initiation. And the fourth initiation is called the initiation, our great renunciation. Remember, it is the illumined mind which dissipates glamour, and the faculty of intuition which dispels illusion. It is the illumined mind which dissipates glamour, and the faculty of intuition which dispels illusion. It is in this hall we are told that as an initiate, we will learn to renounce all that we have and all that we have been, and withdraw from the form life. The great renunciation, the fourth initiation. The fifth hall, which corresponds to the Buddhic plane of consciousness. In this hall, we are told that as an initiate, we will learn to renounce all that we have, all that we have been, and withdraw from the form life. It is in the New Testament where this veil is referred to as the veil of the temple. Isn't that interesting? The veil of the temple. It is this veil that is rent at the time of the fourth initiation. The veil of the temple. We've rendered this veil, and now we'll understand. When this veil is rent, now the dweller in the temple, the monad, are you with me? Are you still with me? This is why I said you need to take notes, or you need to listen to this on our YouTube account, or order the DVD or the CD and listen to it. It's just mind-blowing. There's so much information and so many layers of understanding in this morning's talk. It's very enlightening. So when this veil is rent, the dweller in the temple, the monad, is released, and the unfolding human soul meets himself on the Buddhic plane. See how we still have a few steps to go? I know. This is why we're told in so many different genres, don't give up. Don't give up. Now, the next veil is called the veil of separation. This veil veils the hall of blinded men. And this is the sixth hall, the hall of direction. The veil is called the veil of separation that veils the hall of blinded men. This veil is penetrated at the sixth or seventh initiation. So it's really beyond our consciousness, but the teaching is giving us something to hold on to here. We are told that the rending of this veil creates a tremendous light by which the initiate is blinded. See, and we've read stories about the great ones who, through the parables, have told us about this experience, but we just haven't identified much with it. It is the energy from the hall of blinded men which is causing union, and through it, a new civilization will eventually be built. There's so much conversation among those on the path of the ageless wisdom teaching that believes that we are building a new civilization. in essence, this is what's required. If we want to build a new civilization, we as a consciousness must begin to express synthesis. I think, how can I say this? I think that the fact that so many of us are studying Agni Yoga now, so many of us are studying about synthesis and what it is. So many of us are talking about building a new civilization. Back in the day when Nicholas Rourke and Helena Rourke were going to build the new country, all of this corresponds to impulses of vision to keep us from allowing the mundane life to stop us from progressing. It's inspirational. These teachings are inspirational to think about building a new civilization. Means that the whole of consciousness of humanity will be receptive to transformation, transformational change. And through this transformational change, we will experience, through the effort of everyone, not just, advanced, so-called advanced individuals, but an advanced society, an advanced humanity is going to build this new civilization. And characteristics of the new civilization, characteristical energy, is called the energy of synthesis. Now, I could talk more and more and more about this. I'm so excited about the whole subject. The avatar of synthesis. So many of us have studied, and now our consciousness is trying to align to the avatar synthesis that's coming from beyond into the sphere of consciousness of humanity. So synthesis is starting to be born in the minds of disciples and initiates and disciples and aspirants, planting seeds for our future. Those who are aligned, I truly believe this, and I'm seeing it happen, and it is not age determinate. I think that's a word. It's not age determined, is recognizing there are people on the planet today that are so aligned to the avatar of synthesis that they are making themselves known through challenging the comfort zone of each individual on the planet and helping them think about our future. And the avatar of synthesis and his workers, his disciples, are overshadowing some of those individuals who are young or old, who are aligned with building a new civilization and the energy of synthesis. I just believe this. It's not on faith either. It's based on observation. So it is with the rending of these three veils, we have three kinds of energy: the law, love, and the union of synthesis. The fourth veil, we've had three, now the fourth is called the veil of aspiration, and this is the veil that prevents us from, or challenges us to get into the seventh hall, the hall of monadic light. The hall of monadic light is the seventh hall. This is the veil of the greatest importance to us as a humanity at this time because it releases the energy of mass intent. It is with massed intent, focused through the groups, not individual, but groups, not even individuals in the group, but the group as a total, which are the externalizations of the ashrams of the masters. That the hierarchy is now going to take physical shape upon the earth again. It is then the rent of the fourth major veil that will be made by humanity itself, focused through the externalized ashramic groups that the hierarchy will externalize. The nature of the energy which will pour through this fourth rent may be called life. This is what I'm quoting the Tibetan. The nature of the energy which will pour through this fourth rent may be called life. We learn as we enter each hall that each initiate disciple takes a new initiation. As they take a new initiation, they make their rent bigger and let more light and love and synthesis into humanity. So you see, it is like it's not the individual that's challenged and rewarded by rendering that veil. It is as we each render the veil as it relates to our soul, it also affects the whole of humanity. It is in the rent of the fourth major veil that will be made by humanity itself, focused through the externalized ashramic groups that the hierarchy will externalize. Now, this externalization, as I know it to be, is not isolated only to physical form. But the externalization coming from the Buddhic plane will take on more substance, denser substance, made of the Buddhic plane into the mental, higher mental, lower mental, astral, etheric. And eventually we will find an outpost form, in other words, if I'm making sense, of the energy of this hall into the consciousness of mankind. So it will be fourfold: physical, etheric, astral, mental, all being given birth to through the Buddhic plane, which is as a serving as a transmitter of Shambhala, transmitting energy of Shambhala. I hope you got that. I can't repeat it. Okay. We learn, I'm repeating this, that we make their rent bigger and let more light and love and synthesis into humanity, enabling humanity to achieve greater spiritual realization. At the present time, esoteric groups, which are working under the impression of the Christ, are enlarging the rents in the veils and evoking creative and dynamic energy. They are evoking creative and dynamic energy to the areas that they want the group impact to be felt. With their, and I've got to interrupt myself here because so many of us, I'm in contact with a lot of people around the world. There are so many people in groups now, initiates, disciple-initiates, that are having health problems, they're having personal problems, they're having group problems, or let's change the word problem to challenges, because they are meeting these veils and trying to rend them. If we have done our homework by expanding and broadening our consciousness through the discipline of life, then we are going to have no longer the invisible, unseen understanding of obstacles. See, now we know that this obstacle is purposeful. We'll understand the cause. We will be able to penetrate it to whatever degree we have the ability to render this veil, to let more light into the consciousness of humanity, and to enlarge the rent in the veil. It is with our dedication, intention, one-pointed striving. See, one-pointed doesn't mean zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. And you're going to be given tests how not to zigzag. I kid you not. In your communications, in your sense of purpose, in your challenges, you cannot render a veil through a zigzag experience. This is why we are told to be direct in our communication, not blunt and undiplomatic, but direct. Direct is the opposite of zigzag. Don't zig and zag and zig and zag. It will take you so many lifetimes to get to the point if you live a zigzag life. So, one-pointed striving, which affects us and must be seen and expressed and lived physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Unanimous and simultaneous meditation and service. It is through these efforts that we will penetrate deeper into the veils of the planet. Such groups are providing greater light, purer love, and deeper synthesis for humanity. Now, in the time left, I want to talk about webs, because the webs are vital to our health. A web is different from a veil. Besides the veils, we have what's called webs, which are found between the 7 halls of consciousness and are found within the etheric planes. These webs are to be found between each of our centers on the spine, the etheric spine, and also in the head, which is, how do you say it? Knowing about these webs are so enlightening because there are protectors. The webs are our protectors. They're like a valve that when we undergo pressure and that pressure becomes too much, the pressure is a result of trying to render these veils. The web is there, and like a valve that has a little, I guess a valve, I don't know, doesn't a valve have a little thingy that I tell you, nomenclature has this little thingy that will open up and let the pressure release the pressure. I have a little device at home that does that. Anyway, I don't know if I can say anything more about it without getting too complicated here, and we don't have time for it. What you might want to know, that there are also webs in the brain which are much higher in refined quality and bisect the skull horizontally and vertically. These webs are very much related to and associated with our experiences as we go through initiations. Also related to our experiences as certain centers unfold, or the petals of the lotus begin to unfold. We need these webs as protecting devices so that we don't have spontaneous combustion. So we have webs between the physical and astral planes, between the astral and mental planes, and so forth, that all correspond with our etheric spine. So here's an example. When the web separating your physical, etheric, and astral planes is burned away by the increasing fire of your spirit, your lower three bodies, your physical, emotional, mental bodies now function as one unit. So the web is there to protect us, but once we have rendered these veils, once we have proven ourselves, our dedication, our one-pointed striving, now we no longer need these webs. And now we're one unit. This is the point. At this point, we are an integrated human being. Great unity is achieved then when the web between our mental and intuitional plane is burned away at the fourth initiation. The teaching explains the webs in this way. The etheric web, which is found between the centers in the spine and which is found at the top of your head, protecting your head center. I mean, I've experienced this, so I can talk about it and know it's factual. It's not fantasy. It's not somebody trying to distract us from reality, but it is a teaching that says, when this and this and that happen, this is what you're going to experience. So I'm going to repeat this. The etheric web, which is found between the centers in the spine and which is found at the top of your head, protecting your head center, is destroyed in your mechanism by the activity of certain forces found in that mysterious fire called the Kundalini fire. So at some point, we no longer need the protection of the web, but until we render the veil, until we understand and are successfully pass these obstacles, the blessed obstacles, we need the web or this little device that releases the pressure so we don't have a spontaneous combustion. When you reach a point of development where you begin to see the fourth cosmic ether, known as the Buddhic plane, which is, by the way, where all the sacred planets function on the Buddhic plane, the disintegration of the web between the second and third subplanes of the Buddhic plane starts, and you now begin to achieve a higher level of continuity of consciousness. The initiate disciple at this level now has the right to work there to eliminate the universal source of glamour and evil. Because there are webs between the second and third subplanes of the higher mental, I know we're going to run over this morning, but I cannot stop this and leave it to be continued. Because there are webs between the second and third subplanes of the higher mental, intuitional, atmic plane, the second and third subplanes of the higher mental, intuitional, and atmic planes, when we eliminate these webs or veils, continuity of consciousness is advanced from plane to plane until finally we achieve continuity of consciousness with a monadic awareness. Now I want to say something that is very curious. We are told that the rending of veils does not guarantee the development of the person or expansion of consciousness if the rending is not the result of steady achievement of spiritual realization or pure motive by inner striving, by advanced occult meditation, or by living a life of sacrificial service. Why? Often rents are caused by radioactivity. Often rents are caused by drugs, breathing exercises, chanting, hatha yoga, loud music, and some special movements of dances. These rents mean one thing to an average person and something else to us as a disciple, and something even more different to an initiate. When the veils are rent, a new world emerges with new energies. Initiates have a wonderful opportunity to come in contact with various planes, forces, and entities to gather first-hand knowledge and experience and power to use the new energies. For an average person, or even a person on dark paths, these rents will cause trouble, which will extend to their physical, emotional, and mental planes, leading them into depression and breakdowns, or into a life of aimlessness, vanity, crime, and obsession. I hope you're taking notes. Now let me close with this. The difference between veils and webs. Veils are formed by human urges, desires, aspirations, thoughts, and actions, or even by the urges, desires, aspirations, and thoughts and action of the great life in whom we live and move and have our being. These veils must be destroyed because they prevent unrestricted communication and circulation of life energy among humanity, hierarchy, Shambhala, and the far-off worlds. The webs are protective valves which open when the pressure in a given vehicle is too great. They can lessen the pressure and open a communication line between the inner and the outer. They protect and make communication possible with the higher. When the higher point of pressure is maintained, they act as a door. They act as a door. When that higher pressure is maintained, then the web acts as a door between the higher and lower and are no longer obstructive. We can see the results of the rents. On one hand, we have an inrush of astral forces, lower psychism all over the world, especially in those areas where the web is rent. Like, well, I've told a story so many times when I was in New Orleans in the French Quarter, and there is a veil rent there. It's scary to be there and to see it. If you can't see it, you just feel it and you wonder, ooh, I feel weird. They're like, why are there so many people around me talking to formless entities? Biological effects of radiation is a result of rents, the rending of veils. A universal lack of control of sexual urges, of destructive and criminal drives. On the other hand, we also have emerging disciples who are entering into the path of greater responsibility, of greater love, and greater sacrifice, unfolding within their nature higher psychic powers and stepping into the fiery world, serving one humanity with all that they have and are.